With just over 6 weeks before the governor's election, you can expect a lot more political ads. One of the biggest issues will be the state's economy. And as Tan Trung reports, Louisiana's economic health is up for debate.
We do have a lot of unemployed individuals.
The scary music would tell you Governor John Bel Edwards is doing horribly when it comes to Louisiana's economy. This ad coming from a Republican political PAC.
This year's surplus, saving safety net hospitals, nursing.
Not surprisingly, the mood is more upbeat in this ad by the Edwards campaign, as it tries to convey the message that the state's economy is improving under the governor's watch.
It's pretty healthy. In other words, the important things have been done. Like the budget is balanced, for instance, and we now have those federal funds for health care and things like that. But we're not a booming economy.
Numbers may not lie, but they sure can be spun. Recently, Republicans pointed to figures on non-farm jobs in Louisiana to say overall jobs have declined over the past year under Edwards. The governor's campaign highlighted the adjusted version of those figures to say they've actually grown in the past year. Both are actually right, but a finance professor at Tulane University says jobs don't tell the whole story.
There's spin on both sides. There's just no question about that. But when you take into account the fact that the oil industry has basically disappeared and trade is slowing down, the rest of the economy is doing pretty well.
Professor Raschuti says the strength of the state's economy isn't so reliant on the governor, regardless of who's in office. He says the current price of oil and tariffs are bigger factors. It's a message that may not fit into either side's campaign strategy. Tan Trung, Eyewitness News.
The two major Republican candidates in the race, Ed Rispone and Ralph Abraham, have both criticized Governor Edwards' handling of the economy. Election day is October 12th.